Hello, everyone. Just want to say hello to those of you who are hopping on. It's still a little few more minutes before we're going to go ahead and get started, but just know that we see a lot of you in the attendee list, and we'll give a little bit more time for those to continue to connect. So be patient and we'll get started in probably another 2 minutes. Thank you. All right, everyone. We'll give everyone another minute here to kind of join and get settled. We really want to thank you all for taking the time to hop on this meeting. We know that you're all really busy and you're working through some unimaginable circumstances. So just want to share with you that we appreciate you spending some time here with us, and hopefully we can answer the questions that we know, and then just also share with you the things that we're working on. So I'm Lisa Ritchie. I'm serving as the Interim Director of Planning and Building Safety. On our team here, we have Chad Root, who's the city's building official, and then we also have Cameron Folks, who is the assistant city engineer, to answer any questions about water and utility connections. On the call today, right now, we also have Council Member Maxine Most. She'll be listening in and chiming in as needed as we go through it. We may also have one other council member pop on to hear where you all are and what your questions are. Just know that all of City Council wishes they could be here today, but due to open meetings records, or open meeting rules, we can only have 2 on at any given time. And so they are here to listen, and they'll be sharing back to the mayor and the rest of City Council kind of what they've heard and what all you will be communicating. So today we're here to talk about really information specific to the debris removal and rebuilding process, and acknowledge that we're still really gathering and developing a lot of information. We will share what we know, and that just know that we will continue to work and develop information specifically around the debris removal process as early as next week, and we want to leave time for Q&A at the end. So, we understand debris removal and demolition is everyone's kind of highest priority at this point, when they can get in, how they can get in, what to expect from the rebuilding process. Chad will talk a little bit more about that, but we understand that is your highest priority at this time. And also just want to mention that we expect to be, this to be, we chatted last week a little bit with you all. We're having these meetings this week, and we expect to have many more with you all in the coming weeks and months as you are beginning to understand what the next, year of your life, what all you'll be experiencing. And so we also understand that right now your highest priorities are probably around finding temporary, place to land and maybe some permanent housing, and you're in the midst of understanding insurance and kind of how all this is going to impact you. So we will be revisiting all of the things we talk about today with some materials online in the coming days, so that you don't have to remember to take notes for everything you hear today. We will be publishing information for you probably next week to kind of recap everything so that you all can have kind of a place to go to regather this information, as well as community dialogue. So we've heard from a lot of you that you are hoping that the city can help facilitate some neighborhood-wide discussions. Again, to date, we've really been in kind of emergency mode, trying to understand impacts and immediate life safety things. But we do understand that we think the city will have a role in those conversations at the neighborhood level and community level. But really, in order for those to be, I think, more effective, we want to give you all a little bit of time to get those emergency needs met, have your information, really begin to think about kind of what and how you want to move forward. And so look for more information on further discussions in the coming weeks. So just know that those are on our radar. And then, yeah, Councilmember Most.
Yeah, Deb Fahey is actually signed in as a participant. So if we can elevate her, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you for chiming in. Let's get Councilmember Fahey over here. There she is. So yeah, Councilmember Fahey is our other member of council. So she should be joining here as an attendee.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chad Root, our Chief Building Official, to kind of go through more of the details about what we're working on.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Hey, I'm Chad Root. I'm your community building official for the city of Louisville. I just want, one of the reasons we put this meeting on is just to try to eliminate some of the urban legends and misconceptions out there as far as what's taking place, and kind of get you in the right direction to where you can start the rebuild process or start thinking about it a little bit more. This won't be the only meeting. We'll have other meetings in the future, and at any time that there's questions, feel free to reach out to the planning and building department regarding this, and also public works if you have questions on it. We're here to help you guys through this process. So what I wanted to do is just kind of start off on what took place, and so you understand what the placards are that were put on the buildings. Some of the buildings didn't get placards, just kind of an understanding of that. So what we did on Friday is we assembled a team in the building department with building and planners and volunteers from other cities to come in and do a rapid assessment on Friday, the day after the fire. And the thought on the rapid assessment is kind of what they do in California after the earthquakes or other places that they have fires. The thought behind it is we're trying to get people into their homes as soon as possible, meaning that not everybody has insurance and have funds to stay at a hotel, or they have family and friends nearby. So what we try to do is, if the building had structural deficiencies, we would placard it with a yellow or a red, meaning that, hey, it's dangerous or there's restrictions. If it was a green, that meant that you could go back into the home. There may be smoke damage in the home. There may be blistering, broken windows on it, but as the structure itself, it was not dangerous to go back into. So on that note, if you came across your home or a structure that had a red or yellow tag, and you need to get information, say documents, your social security cards, passports, other information, if it didn't burn down all the way, please contact the building department. I know a lot of you already have. And what we'll do is we'll come over there with you and describe the areas that are of concern or danger, that, hey, it could possibly collapse in this area, stay away from this area. The other areas are fine, or it may be worst case situation. It's just, hey, it's too dangerous to go into. But what we would do is just kind of explain the dangers or concerns of the structure to you. And if there's not a lot of concerns, we would let you go in, and we would not hang out. That way you have time to go through and get the items that you need out of that structure. So with that in mind, so basically the green, if it's placard, it's okay to occupy. Yellow means there was restrictions on it. Red is unsafe to occupy. And most of the homes were actually down to the foundation, which we did not placard it red. So that was the rapid assessment that we went through. Now there's another track called the crisis track. It's a software from the county. And basically it's an assessment that was done for FEMA and the assessment of the losses that were done to the building. And so we also sent a team out there with a lot of volunteers from the city of Boulder and some other jurisdictions to do a crisis track rapid assessment. There is also on this building department's website, there is also a link that you can go to for basically you go in and you can self track. So if you have damage to your house that wasn't noted on the GIS plan or the map, you can go in and say, hey, I have damage to my deck, fences. So a lot of these items were not addressed during the first rapid assessment, but they should have been addressed with these other groups that came in. So if you have a fence that got burnt, other outbuildings that got burnt, even retaining walls that are wood, you can go in and do your self-assessment with this crisis track with the county. And we do have a link in the building department to move forward on that. And even if you have smoke damage to your home, go ahead and claim that. We won't be doing inspections on smoke damage, but it's a way to track what homes have smoke damage. And it's brought out there that, hey, there might be some funds available or extra funds to help people with taking care of smoke damage in their home, which can be, depending on the amount of smoke damage it is, it could be pretty expensive at times to remediate on that. Which kind of brings us into homeowner, contractor demolition permits. So at this point, there is no demo permit fee required for demoing your home if it was affected by the fire. And that means that, hey, if you have water damage, smoke damage, there's no demolition fee that's going to be required of you. Now, where that kind of changes a little bit, that if you're adding a roof or a structure, you will be required to pull a permit, and there may be some fees associated with that. But as far as just straight demo, there are no fees. For standing buildings or partially standing buildings that were damaged, or even smoke damaged structures, we are still required to do the asbestos forms by the state of Colorado, which means that your contractor needs to apply and have an asbestos inspector, which is usually a third-party group, come out and certify that all the asbestos has been removed or there is no asbestos. That does go to the state. It's a 10-day process on that. And then once we get that demolition permit from the state back, we can actually issue the demolition permit on the building department side. Like I said, with the state, it takes about 10 days. On our end, we're several days out on issuing a demo permit. Contractors that you're using must be licensed with the city. This is just to make sure that it's a level playing field with the contractors, and also that they've have some knowledge of as far as what they're doing. Full demo permits, meaning that if your house completely burned down, and you want to get a permit to start removing the foundation, debris around it, and you're doing the work yourself, you're not going with the county option, which Lisa will talk about in a little bit, but you're doing it as you as a homeowner, you're moving forward, or a group of neighbors are moving forward on this. We will not be issuing those permits until February 1st. The reason why is we're still in phase 2 of the county debris removal program, which is basically, I think it's starting next week from what I've been told. And that's public right of way, public property, public buildings, where they're coming in and removing cars, debris, anything that's in the streets. And what we don't want is to have kind of a conglomerate of people trying to remove debris, contractors coming in there with their cars, excavators, dump trucks. It's just too much in order to get a good clean street or public property. So that's why it's staggered out, is to make sure that we don't have the conflict of city removal or the county removal services with contractors. So that being said, what has taken place is the state has waived the asbestos reporting that normally takes place. As long as the home is fully burned, a contractor can come in and they basically wrap the debris with a burrito of two layers of 6 mil plastic, and they put it in a belly dump or back of a truck, and then they wrap it like a burrito and take it to the landfill. What they have to do is they just have to sign a form and send it to the state of Colorado that they are removing this debris and what's taken, how many loads are taken, and that it's moving on these dates. So that's a big help, because there's no 10-day wait period for asbestos inspector to come in and then send it to the state. So that kind of moves it forward on that end. And like I mentioned, on partially damaged properties, you still have to do the asbestos forms through the state. The state's still requiring that. When the contractor is doing the demolition of the foundation of the burn areas, they do have to keep it watered down. The state says wet, not damp, but there's a point where it just can't be dripping water, but it needs to be wet. So none of the asbestos, friable asbestos, can go airborne. And that's a requirement that's required by the state. At the end of the demo permit, there will be a final inspection by the city to verify that, hey, it's been cleaned up properly. On that demo, when your contractor's out there, they will scrape about 2 inches down below the topsoil to make sure that they got all the ash and everything else. And at this point with foundations, I'm recommending that all foundations with buildings that fully burned be removed. I've talked to several engineers, and no engineer will stamp off on the foundation that's been where a house is burned all the way down, because it's just lost its structural integrity for the most part. Homes that have been partially burnt, where the fire and the heat did not come down to the foundation and affect it, we're probably fine on that. You can keep that foundation. But from what I'm seeing out there, most of the foundations will have to be removed. If there's a thought that you could keep the foundation, you can always get a Colorado licensed engineer to say the foundation is structurally sound. But so far, the engineers I've talked to, everyone's like, yeah, it's not worth it. You know, no reason to put a perfectly good new home on a bad foundation, right? Which gets us to hazardous ash. So in my prior life, I was the building official, fire code official, and fire inspector in Park City, Utah. I lost quite a few of my comrades that were fire inspectors, because they would have to shift through the ash after a fire to determine origin and cause. That ash is really full of toxins. So if you do go in there and you're trying to find family heirlooms, make sure that you have proper equipment. I'm not going to tell you can't do it, but be careful, okay, on that. And at this point, I'm going to defer to Lisa on the county demolition plan.
Sure. Thanks, Chad, for covering all that. So yeah, as Chad mentioned, we anticipate 2 options for homeowners to move forward on getting their lots back to a developable condition. One path, as he mentioned, is kind of hiring their own contractor, making sure a contractor meets all the requirements from the state, and doing the work themselves. No permits are anticipated to be issued in advance of February 1st. And that assumes, all of the county cleanup and the rights of way are complete. So stay tuned on that. The other option, and for those of you who have already registered out at the DAC, we have your contact information. We'll contact you when this is ready. But we are trying to provide a coordinated debris removal through, that could be funded or partially funded by FEMA and would be managed by the county for the towns of Superior, City of Louisville, and for the affected portions of unincorporated Boulder County. And so really at that point, if you decide you don't want to go on your own option, you would sign a right of entry form, which again, you will be receiving. And with that, you basically are authorizing then a contractor to come in and do the work on your behalf. And so we are really close to be releasing information on how this will work, including the right of entry form, and expect to receive information on that in the coming days. We understand Town of Superior has already pushed that information out. Don't panic. We are working on that. We will get it to you. Our staff had some more questions that we wanted answered before we were ready to push that form out so that we knew what to expect, a little bit more about what to expect. So stay tuned on that program. If you go down that path, as we understand it, then the county will be hiring contractors that will come in kind of neighborhood by neighborhood and will be effectively kind of removing all of the debris, removing the foundations. And we're not sure yet what degree of site restoration will happen. We're also not sure yet on if you elect to go the county path. Say this came up at the last meeting, if you have, a row of trees that you would like saved, if you have a patio that you would like saved. So how much the county crews, I think, can kind of work around existing things or not. We hope to have you good information before you sign these right of entry forms so that you know what to expect. We also hope to have good information before you sign these forms about the timelines to expect if you go through the county option. As we understand it, those processes can take quite a while. We don't have a clear understanding of how long it will take, but we hope to get that for you to help you make your decisions moving forward. One other note, I think on demolition, and this was more for, I think, the neighborhoods south of Dillon in the Coal Creek Ranch neighborhoods, but this certainly applies kind of throughout. So the Hillside neighborhood in particular, I'm thinking any neighborhood that has coordinated retaining wall systems. So if you have a retaining wall that is it's on your property, but it's crossing multiple property lines and is really functioning to stabilize your lot as well as adjacent lots. Just know that if you take kind of your own path forward on demolition and debris removal, we want to make sure we understand your timing so that we can make sure we're treating these retaining walls carefully to not impact the integrity of the neighborhood. So if you have a retaining wall on your property, before you go on your own path, please reach out and we can coordinate with you depending on kind of the complexity of the wall. Some of them might not need any special attention. Some of them absolutely will need special attention. So I just want to put that on everyone's radar. The other thing too to note about demolition and debris removal timing, again, we hope to get you good information soon, but a lot of the timing questions for when we can start issuing new permits, we don't have yet, and I want to explain why a little bit. We're going to be working to get this understanding, but for example, and we won't know all this information until homeowners kind of pick their path forward. So we do anticipate being able to issue demolition permits, around that February 1st timeframe for properties that are not taking the county path. But for the new build permits, those may be a little more case by case dependent upon the conditions of the neighborhoods for those that have, say 80–90% of a neighborhood has elected to go with a coordinated debris removal option, we need to make sure that the neighborhoods are in a safe condition to access for new construction to start on certain properties. Also with, any work that needs to happen on water line reconstruction. We're still doing our evaluations on the conditions of these infrastructure assessments. And Cameron can talk a little bit more about that. So just at this point, just understand, I think that even if you take control of your own timeline on the demolition in these really severely impacted neighborhoods prior to rebuilding, there's a lot more than just the circumstances on your lot. So we're working to get that information to you the best we can. So that's all I have on demolition from the county level at this point. Chad, you want to take it back?
Yeah, and I think, sorry, my cheat sheet, which was in front of me, which is on the monitor, went out. So I was kind of going blind, but one of the items that Lisa did bring up was on the full demo permit, as I mentioned, and Lisa mentioned, we can't issue until February 1st. You can apply for it now. That way it's ready to go by, when we're ready to issue it, after February 1st. The other item too is if the home that you're in is partially damaged or has smoke damage, you can go ahead and apply for a demo permit right now, and we will issue it to you within a couple days. You do have to have the state asbestos form signed out for that. It's basically their trigger, I think, is anything greater than the 55-gallon barrel or drum of material that's being brought out, then has to go through the asbestos process with the state of Colorado to verify that there's no asbestos in it. But we can issue those now. We have a couple that are taking place where they're trying to protect their home from any future water damage because part of the roof burnt. So they're putting a new roof on, and we want to get those taken care of as soon as possible for you so you can get back into the home. Which brings us to basically retrieving plans of your existing home. I hate to say this, but most likely we will not have the plans of your existing home on record. Most of those homes were built in the 90s during the time period that we did not, it was analog, basically. It was all paper, and under state statute, we kept the plans for 180 days. And then because they were paper, we got rid of them just because we didn't have space. The way that we're doing it now is electronically. So probably 100 years from now, we'll have plans of the home that was built today. You can go ahead and ask through records request if we have those plans. If you do find plans of your home and you want to rebuild it exactly the way that it was, those plans are probably stamped by an architect in many cases if it's in certain subdivisions. If so, that architect of record would have to basically give us a letter saying that you could use that set of plans again. Also, there will be minor changes on those set of plans to meet the newest codes, such as, some of those homes were built with 2x4 walls. Just for the basic energy code of even yesterday, that would need to be a 2x6. So the plans would have to be upgraded to meet current codes. The rebuilding process, I'm going to recommend as your building official that during this process, meet with your neighbors and see what they're planning on doing. The best bet that's going to be the most cost-effective approach is not to have everybody have their own contractor. For example, so if we had 50 lots and there was 50 different contractors, if you can think of the construction traffic, the staging of materials alone issue, and the number of people going back and forth, and it's kind of just mass chaos, right? versus if, you know, you could get with your neighbors and agree, hey, this guy's going to build our home. You know, if there's even 5 of you that agreed on the same home builder, that could save the chaos, because if you think about, and also cost. So if you think about it, this general contractor would have the same concrete people form up the foundations of all 5 homes, and they'd basically do it in a row. They'd form up, pour the foundation in one home, then the next day they'd form up, pour the foundation in the second home, and it would be synchronized pretty well. And the times that you guys would be able to move in and get the CO would be synchronized in that fashion too. Basically, all 5 homes would be ready about the same time, which would bring back a little normalcy to that part of the neighborhood, because it's going to be construction, and less traffic on the road. Plus, with using a contractor that's doing multiple projects, they get a price break on materials. So then it becomes a little bit cheaper. And I'll throw this out there because there's been a lot of questions on it as far as what insurance is paying and what the cost to rebuild an average home. And this is just average. It's about $320 a square foot. Tract home rebuilds are a little bit cheaper because they buy their materials in bulk. It could be a little bit more than $325 if it's just one contractor. So keep that in mind when you're looking at rebuilding. It's about $320, $325 a square foot to rebuild, which is crazy. But materials are pretty expensive. There's shortages on certain materials too, you know, relating to the building industry. So, you know, the other thought is to use one contractor. They can buy all the toilets at the same time. They can buy all the doors at the same time, the windows. You'll probably have the same products as your neighbors in a lot of cases, but at least you'll have it. Lately, we've had a lot of homes that are being built and they're 4 months out on windows. Garage doors are 9 months out on garage doors. So that's something to be looking at when you're you know, when you start the building phase. And the other thing is to don't sign a contract with the first contractor that comes to mind. Do your research, do an interview with the people that they built for before to decide if this guy is, or this person is going to be the best bet for you and your neighbors, as far as timeframes, how they treated you, were the deliverables there. So I think that's key. That's my recommendation. And just be aware of the fly-by-night groups that come in. I call them ambulance chasers, because a lot of times that's what they are. Just like the hailstorms that we've dealt with in the past, you've seen that with the roofing companies. Surveys. After in a lot of these neighborhoods, we're going to need new surveys, because if you think about how severe the damage is to the foundations are going to be removed. Sites are kind of going to be regraded. A lot of those lot pins are going to be destroyed or moved. So we're going to have surveys to make sure that your home is being placed on your lot and not on somebody else's lot, because it's going to look a lot different than it does today, just with the amount of work that's going to be done in that neighborhood. Soils reports. In some cases, we can use existing soils reports, but I've also been told in some neighborhoods that even with the old soils reports, they had foundation issues. So we're looking at, in some neighborhoods, we may have to have new soils reports, because the old soils reports from the 90s, 80s did not account for bentonite in the soil, which is expanding and contracting of the soil as it gets wet and drier. So I think that's huge that we will have to look at soils reports in some neighborhood. The building permit process for anybody.
Sorry.
That's
Chad, I'm gonna pop in real quick right here. Sorry to interrupt you. It looks like before we pivot into this next section, I see 2 of our council members with their hands raised and wanted to know if you had something to chime in here at this point or questions.
I do, yes. Thanks, Lisa. I have a couple of comments. First, I have a question on the 320 a square foot estimate that you gave for reconstruction. Does that include the new code requirements with the ICC?
That does not. That is basically if they're building under the code that we had back in November without solar or any of the electrification.
All right, then the second comment I had was talking about going in and doing your own initial sifting on a site. I wanted to make sure everyone knows that it is risky to do that and that there is PPE equipment or things available for you at the Ascent Church. If you go down there, they'll give you whatever you need to do that. And then the third comment is that actually NOAA is partnering with Boulder County, and they've already started putting the chemical science laboratory is putting a truck through all of the neighborhoods and the surrounding areas to measure the VOC levels in the air. So we will know what the quality is, and they think that they can do a high resolution map of what the different levels of the different chemicals are. So those were my only comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I had a quick question about that 320 number too. Does that include the foundation?
That does include the foundation.
Okay, because
Yeah.
I have a friend who's in real estate who just took a class in this in Colorado, and she had said that it was 300 to 600 for a full build. That was like a new build, but that's essentially what folks are going to be looking at. So I think it really depends on, obviously the quality of materials and finishes and all of that sort of thing too. So I think people need to understand that 320 is the floor of what's likely. I'm glad to hear that that includes the foundation. I wasn't sure about that. So
Yeah, so that's kind of, like you said, that's kind of the average floor home. And that's a little bit more than a tract home the aspect, where they're mass producing. So that's why I'm saying when you get into more of the single builds or the custom, it's going to go on up from there. It's going to be quite a bit more, just like your realtor friend said. It's this is kind of basically a home with Formica countertops and carpet on the floors. Okay, so talking about building permits, so what we're doing is with permits that are fire related, we are setting up a different track. It's kind of like a fast track system. So once we get permits in, we're going to be hiring additional plans examiners. We've hired an extra permit tech. We're going to basically work with you down this track, and we have staff members that will help in every aspect that we can to make sure that we get the plans reviewed in a timely fashion and the permit issued as fast as possible. So there's kind of two tracks. There's the regular track that other residents in town will go through, and then there's the fire track where we have extra staff to help out with the plan review process. We're going to hire extra inspectors as well to get that through the process as soon as possible. That being said, that during the review process, the home will still have to be looked at by planning and public works and the fire department to ensure that the height of the structure meets city code, their setbacks are correct. Public works on the water infrastructure, as well as the right-of-ways on that. And then the fire will take a look at the fire suppression system, which is part of current code and the code before this as well. So that being said, at this time, homes will be required to meet current building code with fire suppression system. And we're talking about with council members and staff, the energy code, how this is going to affect it. There'll be determination coming up later on where we're at with that. I think that at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa for planning and zoning.
Sure. Thanks, Chad. So quickly, when you, as Chad mentioned, when you submit a building permit, one of the reviews is around the zoning regulations, and those typically for a single family home are things like setbacks, so distance from property lines, how tall you can build your buildings. Those remain in effect. So those are in place before your homes get built, and they're in place today. And so those same kind of zoning regulations still apply. That being said, if we hear from some of you, and we've heard from some of you already that maybe you're interested at kind of a sub neighborhood level or a larger neighborhood level, or maybe through your HOA that you're interested in having those conversations about changing your underlying zoning standards, please reach out to us. You know, that process takes some time to get through because those require typically some public hearing processes. We're very open to having those conversations with you, but just know that those are in effect, those remain in effect, and reach out and we'll talk about it. Also know on kind of those neighborhood scale conversations, as I mentioned before, we do plan on holding those to talk about these types of questions more at the neighborhood level, about coordinated rebuilding, and if you all want to make any changes to your underlying zoning. So stay tuned. We want to give you a little bit of time to get settled. Think about how you want to move forward before we can advance some of those conversations. So with that, I want to turn it over to Cameron, who can talk a little bit about water and utilities.
Sure, thanks, Lisa. I'm Cameron Folks. I'm the Assistant City Engineer. Just going to go over a few things from Public Works real quick, and then we'll get to questions. So regarding your water services to your homes, the meters in almost all of these homes were located in the basement, which doesn't meet current standards. So when you rebuild, we're going to ask that you move those outside into meter pits just behind the back of the walk. As Chad said, you will have fire suppression systems with the new build, so you'll have a backflow preventer in your basement or crawl space. So that'll be something to think about moving forward. One thing that's up in the air for us right now is water services. We're currently working with the state health department and determining whether or not the water services need to be replaced from the main line out in the street to your structure. So that may or may not happen, depending on our conversations with the health department as far as water goes. As far as costs, if you generally build the same house that you had before, there won't be any fees for water taps. If you decide to build a larger home, or you decide to buy, let's just say, the lot next to you and make a really large home, there may be additional water tap fees depending on the size of the home and how many water fixtures you guys have in that. Okay, moving on to sewer services. We highly suggest having all your sewer services scoped. Make sure they're not melted or burned or compromised in any way. We don't want to have a brand new home built with a bad sewer service. And as far as right-of-way permits go from Public Works, if you choose to go down the path of doing your own debris removal on your site, you will need to get a right-of-way permit. That is a no-fee right-of-way permit. If you choose to do the county path, the county takes care of everything through the right-of-way. So the new construction, you'll be required to have a right-of-way permit as well, but that's kind of when the fees kick in, similar to the building department. So I think that wraps up the Public Works side. So back to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Cameron, for that overview. So with that, we want to open it up to questions. But before we do, I just wanted to kind of let everyone know we have at this meeting around 240 folks in attendance. At our last meeting, we had closer to 300. So just know that we see that there are a whole lot of you with a lot of questions and are seeking information. As I mentioned at the start of the meeting, we'll plan on continually updating kind of our website with application forms and processes. We're still developing a lot of those. So hopefully as early as next week, we'll have a little better idea for some of these debris removal type applications and processes, but stay tuned for that. And with that, the first one I'm going to call is Brian with the initials LMP afterward. And when we call you, you'll probably have to unmute on your end as well. So go ahead, Brian.
Thank you for taking my call, and thank you for your work here. I'm owner of Louisville Master Plumbing here in Louisville, and been serving the customers for several years. So we want to see these customers back as soon as possible and help in any way. We also own Testa LLC, which will be helping in getting the debris removal process started. My question center around these services really. From a building standpoint and approval, we understand there's different permits we're going to need and testing to do. My first question is, what is the demo going to look like, or what should it look like when we're done? Is there a template that you'll have for us to say, yeah, we want these 5 things done. We don't want any holes there. We want them backfilled. We want fencing around there if you leave holes. Obviously, the fastest way to get things moving is for us to excavate this stuff out, remove concrete and pulverize that stuff, get it out and moved, and leave the hole. That makes most sense to getting people in there. The next step, if we have to backfill, it's kind of an intermediate step. So can we do fencing? Can FEMA or someone help us with that fencing? So basically, what is that demo going to look like? I know you may not have the answers to this stuff now, but that'll guide us as demolition contractors and doing this process. And also, what support could we rely on the city? Typically, when we have major events like this, we operate on a 2-step process. We use short haul drivers that bring in 15-ton dump trucks. That way one operator can, possibly clear 6 lots per day on this equipment and have pulverizers to make this stuff happen. And then we stage that somewhere locally so we can keep those trucks moving and keep our guys moving. But then we also have long haul trucks taking from the stage. These are, 100 cubic yard big semis pulling the stuff out. So it really limits the logistics and allows us to be tactical and kind of surgical in that. So we'd like to know what we could count on from the city in terms of that staging support. We're happy to bring in, whatever equipment we need to make that scene safe. And we don't want to create, take all these homes and put our debris somewhere else and get somebody else upset or contaminate groundwater. So if we need to get dozers in there or something to create a pit where everybody can use and get fences around that, we could have city supervision or whoever. Those are some options to really make this process work quick and get this stuff moved on. So I'd like to just be thinking about that and have, you guys reach out to us where we can to work together.
Lisa, you want me to answer some of that?
Yeah, I would say for those of you, just real quick, for those of you that take kind of the county coordinated, county is going to manage all of the debris removal. And I think some of these questions are going to depend on how many people take each path. And then, as far as how much we need to provide these storage sites. And from there, Chad should take the rest.
Okay, so kind of, Brian, to answer some of that. So the county coordinated route, they're looking for like 5 to 10 acres where they can do exactly what you're saying, where they bring the materials, separate the concrete, possibly recycle the concrete, break it up.
Sure.
On the private route, since there's the county's doing their part, right?
Sure.
The landfill that's Front Range Landfill is willing to take this material,
Okay.
which is over in Erie. So
Yep.
you may, as far as staging areas for this debris, you may have to just, unless you find something outside the area. But for basically what the state has said, that any of this demolition can go into a truck, but you have to line it like a burrito, 2 layers of number 6 mil plastic, right? So once that goes in, before it can be transported, it has to be wrapped according to the state's guidelines. So
Sure.
at that point, basically you have to take to the landfill. They're not allowing you to take it to another site. Okay.
Okay.
Beauty is thank God that Erie's close enough, right? It's not a Rapid
Sure.
County or somewhere else. On that end. What was your other question?
Well, I mean, we can't really get, it's hard to get semis and cul-de-sacs and things like that. I mean, heavy equipment's enough getting it in there. So we do want to try to work with folks that want private options, because we can work quick as soon as we get calls and as soon as we have permits in place. We're ready to go. We have John Deere's local support, any equipment that we need, in addition to anything else we can speed up the process. We feel we could definitely make an impact in that. But yeah, if there's no city land where we can stage, they're going to want us to double line and put it in plastic to take it out. That does change a little bit about the staging that we had hoped to use in this case.
Right.
We have other suppliers, including Vara, to take our concrete and recycle that stuff, to turn it into road base and things like that. So yeah, we can separate that stuff. That would be our preferred, method to do.
And then Brian, on the removing the foundation, leaving the hole there for the new foundation and basement, we would allow that as long as there was a permit already applied for and basically ready to go for the new house.
Okay.
But what we don't want is, we don't want a bunch of these open pits. So the thought is behind it is, hey, the county program actually has in place where they'll backfill a lot of these with fill dirt. But on the private side, if there was a permit pulled to start building the new home, then we would be good to have that open, to just leave it there and not backfill the hole.
So 30 days, 60 days to get the contractor in something reasonable like that, or are we talking?
Yeah,
like,
if basically the permit's paid for at that point, it's vested. And so being that it's paid for, they're going to move forward is kind of our thought behind it. So then they have a little bit of time frame, and I understand finding contractors is kind of hard and tough, but something like that we're okay with.
Okay, yeah, because we deal with a lot of the stuff as a plumbing company. We can, if the sewer is viable, say the building sewer is viable, the building drain with a lot of the plastic pipe, probably with the newer homes, that may be melted and will be gone when we pull out the foundation. But if
Hey,
we
Brian,
can,
I'm sorry to jump in here. We have a lot of folks, so I'm going to think we're going to move on, but really appreciate your line of questioning. We will plan on publishing kind of all of our permitting requirements and all of these timelines. So in the coming days and weeks, just look for more information. So I apologize to cut you off. I just want to make sure we give homeowners and others on the line.
okay, I just want to make sure too that they understand that they've got choice both ways.
Yep. No, thank you for that. So with that, we're going to move on to Matt.
Great, thanks. Early on in the demolition, they talked about timing and logistics and all, but I didn't hear anything about cost. And I understand that some of it might be sucked out of our insurance amount. And if so, some or all, how will the information that you're going to share with us in the next week include that as well?
We have those same questions, and we understand that we are getting questions from homeowners, and on that, we hope to be able to have the best information possible by the time you have to sign these right of entry forms, so that you know kind of all these pros and con impacts as far as costs associated to you, costs your insurance company is going to have to take on, what that reduces your payout to. Some of those specific insurance questions, though, we won't be able to answer, just that you will have to make sure that, in addition to what we put out, you are coordinating directly with your own insurance companies so that you understand the impacts as it relates to your specific policy. And so with that on insurance, if you haven't been out to the DAC yet, or if you have and you missed talking to the State Insurance Commission and the United Policies Holders groups, there are people out there at the DAC to help homeowners navigate these insurance questions. So just want to put that out there on that.
I appreciate it. I understand my insurance. It's just unclear to me. I mean, is there going to be a flat fee for each house that contributes? Or are they going to do it by square footage? Or are they going to do it by the amount of insurance I have? I understand my part. I don't have any visibility on the city part.
Sure. So we're working to make sure we understand all that. We have all those same questions. We'll do our best to get it out in time for you to make these decisions, knowing that it's, you know, relatively complicated. So thank you for the question. I know a lot of you have those same questions.
Yeah,
Next up, we have.
It's just a question of trying to decide, you know, between option A and option B.
Absolutely.
We need the information to do that. Yep. Thank you.
Yep. And also knowing you all need information, I think, as far as timing, you know, so if you take the county coordinated option, all of those, you have a lot that will weigh into. I'm sorry, I'm cutting people off. I apologize for that. I don't intend to do so.
I appreciate you being expeditious. I don't mind being cut off. I thought that the last person took way too much time for a single thing. So I'm going to check out now, and please go on to the next person.
All right, thank you. So with that, we have Gilbert P.
Yes, thank you. +1 to Matt's question, excellently and efficiently framed. So I will go on to my next question. I'm very concerned that you all are still contemplating changes to the code. I'm worried we're going to have a changing set of goalposts here that designers are going to worry about. And I know you all are under a lot of pressure, time pressure. I appreciate that. But can you give us a deadline by which we will know what the codes are under which we are rebuilding?
Great question. Yep, great question. We understand that all of getting those questions impacts you setting your budgets, and it impacts you setting when you can submit permit record or your permits. So absolutely, I think at this point, I'm not going to speak for council, but I do know that these conversations will happen, I think, relatively quickly about the areas that they're interested in changing. And I also can assure you, I think council understands the reason for timeliness. So I wouldn't expect to have a solid answer on that for at least a couple of weeks. And after that, I think stay tuned, but I don't know if council members, if you want to chime in any more with that.
I'll just say quickly that we haven't had this discussion as a council yet. So there have been comments, but there's been no substantive discussion. So I wouldn't assume anything until we have a chance to actually have a meeting and a discussion.
Great, thank you
for that. I really appreciate your considering this timely and thoughtfully.
All right, so next up we have a Christian D.
Yes, thank you. So my question is in regards to the permit application fees. I know that the current structure for a new build is based on, you know, percentages for the city and the county of those construction costs. Being that this would be a new construction, is there any consideration being given towards a credit back similar to additions or renovations where you're only paying on the increase of square footage from what you had prior?
Chad, maybe do you want to talk about how our permit fees are structured normally, and then just know that all of those will be evaluated for fire affected folks?
Yeah. So Christian, at this point, are you talking building permit fees, impact fees? So it sounds like on impact fees, if you rebuild and it's not larger than the original square footage, there will be no impact fees. As far as building permit fees, at this point, from what I've been told, the fees are going to remain the same as it is for any other project. And that's basically we're going to ramp up with additional staff members to help this process with getting the plan reviews done in a kind of a fast track, having the additional inspectors around, administrative services. So that kind of pays for that. We're not, we're keeping the fees the same, but we're adding additional staff. So at this point, that's staying the same as far as just the building permit fee. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Just want to chime in too, just, you all probably know this, but we are looking and talking with kind of all of our, partners and hoping for some funding sources that even if, potentially our fee structure doesn't change, that there's funding options for all sorts of buckets of cost. And so we don't really have a good expectation of kind of what and how and where these funds could get applied or if they can get applied. But just know that we recognize that a lot of you are underinsured and there's going to be costs associated. And I can assure you that our leadership is doing everything they can to try and secure funding. So we don't really have much more to share at this point on anything specific. So with that, let's move to Lisa W.
Hi, thanks.
Sorry, Lisa, try again. I think I cut you off.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, terrific. I had a question about the DAC registration. We haven't been able to get there. We're out of town. Can we register by phone or speak to somebody to get access to those resources?
That's a great question. So our understanding is some of the work needs to happen in person. However, I don't know exactly what are the timelines on that. So I would give you, give me 1 second and I'm going to read a phone number in for you to call to our call center and they can connect you in with the people that maybe can take some information over the phone and let you know kind of how you can connect if you aren't local. So I'm going to read that number in here in just 1 minute. With that, let's move to Tim C. And then I'll read the number in after Tim's question.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everybody, for doing this. This is really helpful. Chad, I just wanted to pick up on your concept of pooling together with, 4 or 5 neighbors to find a builder. Has there been any discussion within the city with developers, or have developers reached out to do it at a little bit larger scale, like say 20 or 30 homes in a neighborhood?
So yeah, there has been reach out. Here's the hardest part of this is every lot is owned by an individual person that has a different thought or concept. And we have, and I don't know if I ever want the ability to make the decision or dictatorship to say everybody has to use contractor A, right? And being a government entity, I can't even recommend, decent contractors because that's a conflict of interest. So there has been contractors out there that have mentioned, hey, we would love to rebuild this whole subdivision. We would love to do this neighborhood. And it's come from different groups of groups in the contracting community. I think that's wise for a neighborhood or a group of people to get together and use one contractor. It's really going to streamline the process and also cut down the cost. So we have received emails from different contractors, but just because we're government, we can't say, hey, contractor A is going to do that. It's just, at this point working with the homeowners.
Great, thank you. So with that, I'm going to read in a few points of contact information. We're a little bit after 2 o'clock. We'll hang on for one more question after I read this in. And with that, we recognize that there are a lot of hands raised that we're not going to have time to get to. So with questions for the building department specific to the conversation today, excuse me, please email building@louisvilleco.gov for more of these general type questions. Excuse me, email marshallfire@louisvilleco.gov. And for if you'd rather reach over the phone, we do have a contact phone number for fire related questions. That's 720-824-3100. Excuse me. And so with that, we are going to take one more question from Joanne S.
Thank you for putting this together. Well, I think you guys are really doing a great job, and I appreciate all the outreach that you're making. And the question I have is whether or not there's like boulders and paving stones, for example, that we just recently put in our yard. And is it possible if we go to salvage that off our front yard? How do we do that? Who do we contact? It's not going to be in the rubble because the rubble is all in the basement. But is that stuff toxic too, or what do we need to do there?
So on those stones that you're trying to salvage, if you're trying to salvage the stones, you know, it's tough because you don't have water, right? But ultimately, what you probably want to do is bring in some water, wash down those stones. If your contractor can move it to the side, and it kind of depends what route you go on. We had a question at the 11:30 meeting as far as saving trees if they go the county route. I did get a call from a couple people that said that, hey, if you go the county route and you mark the trees, if they're not in the way, they'll save the trees. I'm sure that if you had these boulders, decorative rock in the location, they could save that as well. If you go on the private route, you have a little more say because the contractor is working directly for you.
Okay.
That.
Well, just one more, thank you, that's helpful. One more quick thing. Would it be possible for, you know, the city to put together some sort of developer forum? So not necessarily a recommendation, but where these developers could come and, you know, in this perhaps of an instance and get 20 minutes or whatever appropriate amount of time to make their pitch to the communities, so that we're not all sort of scattershot. Our community, I think, is spread out. Everybody are so spread out all over. Would that be a possibility?
You know, I think it's a good suggestion. I think we're still trying to figure out the right way to facilitate these neighborhood conversations. And
Okay.
but that's a really good suggestion to consider as we're thinking through how to have those conversations. Thank you for that. All right. So with that, you know, we're well past 2. And again, we just want to reiterate that we understand how as best we can, you know, just the difficulties that are in front of you. And we're here to help you all get home as quickly as you can, as safely as you can. And so please reach out with any questions that you have to our department directly or to the broader Marshall Fire email. And with that, I kind of want to give the last word to our council members if they have anything they'd like to say before we sign off.
I would just say that being one of the people experiencing the loss of a home, I understand what you're going through, and I extend all of my sympathies and compassion to every one of you. We are trying to do whatever we can to facilitate this and make sure that we can get as much state and federal funding as possible to cover the costs, especially the additional costs that the IECC may impose. But we're moving ahead as quickly and as efficiently as we can. So you're all in our prayers. Thank you.
And just to, you know, agree with everything Deb said, and just to quickly say that I know it's hard to be patient. I know it feels like everything's moving at a snail's pace, but it really hasn't even been 2 weeks yet. And this is going to be a process that we're all going to have to go through together. And as Councilmember Fahey said, the staff is working incredibly hard to serve you. And the city council is going to do everything that we we are able to do to support you.
Great, thank you. All right, so we're going to sign off. Please reach out with any other questions and look forward to more information on continuing all of these discussions soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.